My CEO told me I was just the IT guy. When he slashed my salary, I destroyed their company's operations. The stock dropped 62% in one day. I, 34 male, never really cared about job titles. You can call me a computer janitor for all I care, as long as the check clears and you let me build cool stuff. But my official title was Senior Systems Architect for a mid-sized logistics giant, let's call it Logicorp, that moves about $400 million in freight across North America every year. To the average person, I fix printers. To anyone who understands how modern supply chains work, I was the guy who built the central nervous system of the company. I wrote a piece of proprietary middleware I called The Bridge. See, Logicorp had this ancient dinosaur-era ERP system from the late 90s that stored all our data. But we had to talk to modern, sleek systems used by Amazon, Walmart, and Target. These systems don't speak the same language. The Bridge was the translator. It took the messy data from our old system, polished it up, and shook hands with Amazon's cloud APIs in real time. If the bridge works, thousands of trucks move and packages get delivered. If the bridge stops, Logicorp becomes nothing more than a very expensive parking lot filled with confused truck drivers. Things were great under the old man, the founder. He was the kind of guy who knew the name of every warehouse shift lead and understood that IT wasn't a cost center, it was a force multiplier. But the old man got sick about 6 months ago. Parkinson's. He had to step down. That's when the board brought in Brad. Brad is the founder's nephew. He's 29, has an MBA from a school his dad probably donated a library to, and has never lifted a box in his life. He walked in on day one wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than my Honda, talking about corporate synergy and trimming the fat. The first thing he did was move my office. I used to be up on the executive floor near operations so I could respond to crises instantly. Brad moved me to the basement, literally, a windowless storage room next to the humming server racks that was always either freezing or boiling. He gave my old office to his chief vibe officer, a guy who I'm pretty sure was just his frat brother who needed a job. I kept my head down. My wife and I are trying for a baby, and the fertility treatments are draining our savings. I needed the insurance. I needed the stability. So I swallowed my pride, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and kept the code running. The incident that ruined everything happened 3 weeks ago. I got a calendar invite for a performance and budget review at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. Classic power move. You fire people on Fridays so they can't make a scene or talk to colleagues. I walked into the boardroom and the vibe was instantly hostile. Brad was there, leaning back in the founder's leather chair, feet up on the mahogany table, scrolling through TikTok on his phone. The HR director, a woman I've known for 5 years and who usually asks about my wife, was staring at her notepad, refusing to meet my eyes. "Sit down," Brad said without looking up. I sat. He finally tossed his phone onto the table and sighed like I was wasting his time. "We have been reviewing the operational budget," he said, "and frankly, the IT department is bloated. You are pulling in $185,000 a year. That is the market rate for a senior architect with my specialization," I replied calmly. "Actually, it is slightly below market rate, but I stayed for the benefits and the founder." Brad let out a wet, dismissive laugh. "For what?" he asked. "For restarting routers? For updating Windows? Look, I have a buddy who runs a dev shop in Manila. They can do everything you do for $30,000 a year. We don't need an IT architect. That's a made-up title to inflate your ego. We need an IT guy to plug in monitors and reset passwords." I felt the heat rising in my neck, but I kept my voice steady. "Brad, I don't just plug in monitors. I built The Bridge. That software handles 30,000 API requests an hour. If that code goes down, the trucks stop. The API handshakes require constant maintenance because Amazon changes their protocols every other week. You fire me, you lose the ability to schedule shipments." "Don't try to tech-splain me," he snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "Here's the deal. We're restructuring your role. You are now the IT support lead. Your salary is being adjusted to $65,000, effective immediately. Take it or we accept your resignation." I sat there stunned. He was slashing my pay by nearly 65%. It was constructive dismissal. He wanted me to quit so he didn't have to pay severance. "I have an employment contract," I said. "It stipulates my role and salary." "And that contract has an at-will clause and a role reassignment provision," Brad smiled. It was a shark's smile. All teeth, no warmth. "We checked with legal. You're just the IT guy now. Take the deal or walk. Oh, and if you walk, we'll fight your unemployment claim. We'll say you were incompetent. I'll make sure you are blacklisted in this industry. I know people." The arrogance was suffocating. He genuinely believed that my work was magic that just happened on its own, and that by paying me a professional wage, I was stealing from him. "I need 24 hours to consider," I said. "Fine," he waved a hand. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. If you stay, you're training the offshore team starting Monday." I walked out of that room with a ringing in my ears. I went down to my basement office, closed the door, and sat in the dark for 10 minutes. I was terrified. $65K wouldn't cover our mortgage and the medical bills. We'd lose the house. But then the fear turned into something cold and sharp. I started digging. See, Brad wasn't just being a jerk. He was desperate. I accessed the system logs, something I had full clearance for, and started looking at the financial queries he'd been running. I found it pretty quickly. Brad was leveraging the company's assets to secure a massive personal loan. He was trying to buy a penthouse in Miami and a significant stake in some sketchy crypto startup. To get the loan approved by the bank, he needed to show a higher EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. By shashing high salaries like mine and replacing us with cheap offshore labor, he could artificially inflate the company's profit margins on paper for just long enough to get his loan approved next quarter. He was gambling with the livelihoods of 400 employees so he could buy a condo. And that's when I remembered the contract. 7 years ago, when I first wrote The Bridge, I didn't write it for Logicorp. I wrote it as a side project on my own weekends to automate my own workflow. When the founder saw it, he realized how valuable it was. He wanted to buy it, but I was smart. I refused to sell the code outright. Instead, I signed a licensing agreement. The contract stated that Logicorp had a perpetual, non-exclusive license to use the software, contingent on my continued employment or a mutually agreed-upon severance package. If I was fired for cause, they kept the license. If I resigned, they kept the license. However, if the contract was voided due to a material breach by the employer, like, say, a unilateral 65% pay cut and a demotion without cause, the license agreement had a termination clause. The rights would revert entirely to the owner, me.
Called my lawyer. He is expensive, charges $400 an hour, but he is a shark. I sent him the contract and the recording of the meeting. I live in a one-party consent state. Always record your performance reviews, guys. He called me back an hour later. "You have them," he said. "If they change your role and salary that drastically without mutual consent, they are breaching the employment agreement. That voids the conditions of the license. You can pull the plug." I went back in the next morning, Saturday at 9 a.m. "Well?" Brad asked. He was eating a bagel, getting crumbs all over the boardroom table. "I decline the new role," I said, keeping my face blank. "And since you are materially changing the terms of my employment, I consider this a termination without cause. I will be clearing out my desk." Brad laughed, a loud barking sound. "Termination without cause? Nobody. You are quitting. No severance. And don't think you are taking any company property. Security." 2 guards walked in. I knew these guys. We played fantasy football together. They looked apologetic, looking at their shoes. "Escort him out," Brad ordered, wiping cream cheese from his lip. "He doesn't touch a computer." "Brad," I said, "one last chance. We need to discuss the license for the bridge." "The bridge?" He looked genuinely confused. "You mean the code? We own that. It's on our servers. Get out." "Read my contract, Brad." I don't read the helps contracts, he sneered. Get out. I didn't scream. I didn't flip a table. I just nodded. I walked out to the parking lot, got in my Honda, and drove home. Then I waited. The thing about the bridge is that it requires a heartbeat. It's a security feature I built in to prevent piracy. Every 24 hours, the system pings a remote server, a server I pay for personally, to verify the license key. It's standard DRM. If the license key is valid, the data flows. If the license key is revoked or expires, the middleware goes into safe mode. It stops processing data to prevent unauthorized use. I got home, opened my personal laptop, and logged into my private server. I drafted a formal email to Brad, the founder who still had a seat on the board, and the legal department. Subject: Notice of IP license revocation. Per the terms of my employment contract, the license for the software known as The Bridge is contingent upon the terms of said contract remaining valid. Due to the unilateral breach of contract regarding my compensation and role, the license is hereby revoked effective immediately. You have 24 hours to cease all use of my intellectual property or negotiate a new usage agreement. I hit send. I didn't get a reply. Brad probably deleted it without reading it. 24 hours later, the heartbeat pinged my server. My server replied, 403 forbidden, license revoked. The chaos started slowly, like a pot coming to a boil. At 8 a.m. on Monday, the warehouse floor managers couldn't print the pick list. They assumed the printers were broken. They rebooted them. Nothing. At 8:30 a.m., the trucks at the loading dock couldn't get their gate passes generated. The system couldn't verify which pallets were on which truck. A line of 18-wheelers started to form, backing up out of the lot and onto the main road. By 9 a.m., the operations floor was in meltdown. Phones were ringing off the hook. Drivers were idling in the yard, burning diesel, screaming at the dispatchers. At 10:15 a.m., my phone rang. It was Brad. I watched it ring. I took a sip of coffee. I let it go to voicemail. 10:17 a.m., Brad again. 10:20 a.m., Brad again. 10:25 a.m., the company lawyer. I answered the lawyer. "This is OP," I said. "OP, this is stuck." The lawyer sounded breathless. He was panic sweating. I could hear it in his voice. "What did you do? The entire system is down. We are losing $50,000 an hour. Turn it back on." "I didn't do anything," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I simply stopped authorizing the use of my personal property as I notified you by email yesterday. Is Brad there?" There was a scuffle on the line. Brad's voice came on, shrill and high-pitched. "Listen to me, you little thief. I will sue you into the ground. I will have the FBI at your door for cyber terrorism. Turn it back on right now." "Brad," I said, letting a little bit of steel enter my voice, "I haven't hacked anything. I haven't touched your servers. Your system is simply failing to verify a license you no longer pay for. It's a contract dispute. And frankly, your tone isn't helping negotiations." "Negotiations? I am not negotiating with a terrorist." "Okay," I said. "Good luck explaining to the board why operations have halted." I hung up. Then I turned off my phone. This is where things got really interesting. Remember the founder, the nice old man? He wasn't just sitting at home knitting. He still owned 40% of the company's stock, and he still had alerts set up for the system status. While Brad was screaming at me, the founder was trying to log into his executive dashboard to check the daily numbers. He got a 404 error. He called me on my wife's phone. He had the number from the company holiday party list years ago. "Son," the founder said. His voice was shaky but sharp. "What is going on? The dashboard is dead." I told him everything. The meeting, the pay cut, the insult about being just an IT guy, and then I told him about the logs. I told him about the Miami condo and the leverage scheme Brad was running to pump the numbers. There was a long silence on the other end. "He tried to replace you with an offshore farm to buy a condo?" the founder asked. "Yes," I said, "and he slashed my pay to force me out so he could pump the EBITDA." I see, the founder said. Keep your phone off for another hour. I'm going to the office. By noon, the news had leaked. In the logistics world, gossip travels faster than fiber optics. Logicorp is dark. Amazon suspended their contract. Trucks are turned away. Logicorp is a publicly traded entity on the mid-cap index. When rumors fly that a logistics company can't move product, the market reacts instantly. The stock opened at $42.10. By 1 p.m., as the silence from the company continued, it hit $35. Then, one of my loyal guys who was still in the basement, let's call him Mike, did something brave. He leaked the internal memo Brad had sent to the whole company screaming about sabotage and hackers. The market hates uncertainty. It hates sabotage even more. At 2:30 p.m., the stock was at $28. At 3 p.m., the founder walked into the boardroom with the rest of the board of directors. He had called an emergency vote. I learned this part later from the HR director who sent me a bottle of scotch as a thank you. Brad was screaming into a landline, trying to find an external contractor who could crack my compiled code. Good luck with that. It's encrypted. You'd need a supercomputer and 100 years to brute force it. The founder walked in, took the phone from Brad's hand, and hung it up. "You're done," the founder said. "He hacked us," Brad sputtered, sweating through his expensive suit. "He's holding us ransom." "He is enforcing a contract I signed," the founder said. "And you idiot, tried to leverage my company to buy a condo. We saw the bank inquiries." The board voted unanimously. Brad was terminated for cause, gross negligence, and breach of fiduciary duty. Security didn't even let him pack his bag. A box. They walked him out right then and there. But the damage was done for the day. The market closed before we could issue a statement. Logicorp stock had ended at $15.80, a 62% drop. The company had lost hundreds of millions in market cap in 6 hours. At 5 p.m., my phone rang again. It was the founder. "He's gone," the founder said. "I'm interim CEO. Now, can we talk about a consulting fee to turn the lights back on?" "I'm expensive," I said. "I know," he chuckled. "How does triple your previous hourly rate sound, plus a new contract with a solidified IP royalty?" "Send the DocuSign." I logged into my server. I reactivated the license key. 15 minutes later, the truck started moving. The fallout was immense. The SEC investigated the sudden stock drop and Brad's leverage attempts. Because he had been bragging about the cost savings to his finance buddies before the drop, he was flagged for potential insider trading manipulation. That is still winding through the courts, but it doesn't look good for him. Brad tried to sue me personally for tortious interference. My lawyer filed a motion to dismiss based on the valid IP contract. The judge, a woman who clearly understood contract law better than Brad, dismissed it with prejudice. She practically laughed him out of court. She noted in her ruling that an employee is not a serf. If you utilize their personal property, you must pay for it. When you stop paying, you lose the right to use it. The plaintiff's arrogance is not a legal defense. The company took a massive hit. It took 3 months for the stock to recover to even half its original value. We lost the Amazon contract for a quarter, which cost us millions in revenue. I went back as a consultant. I don't go into the office anymore. I work from my home office in my pajamas. I charge $450 an hour with a minimum monthly retainer that pays my mortgage, even if I don't type a single line of code. Brad lost everything. The bank pulled his loan approval for the condo when he lost his job. He is currently facing lawsuits from shareholders for the value destruction. Last I heard, he is working at his father's car dealership, managing the digital sales department. I saw his LinkedIn profile the other day. It says, "Visionary leader open to new opportunities." I didn't destroy the company. I just took back what was mine. The company destroyed itself the moment it decided that the people who build the systems are worth less than the people who sit in offices taking credit for them. It was a hard lesson for everyone. You never tell the guy holding the keys that he is just the doorman, because sometimes he's the only thing keeping the roof from collapsing on your head.
If you enjoyed reading about how I legally dismantled a corporate tyrant, you might want to subscribe. I promise my next story won't cost anyone $100 million. Probably.